Welcome to Chicon 8. Please welcome your hosts, Annalie Newitz and Charlie Jane Anders from the Hugo Award-winning podcast, Our Opinions Are Correct.
We're already trying to decide between whether we should read the digital version or the paper version up here.
Are the mics not on?
Are the mics on now?
How about now?
Hello.
Hello, check, check, check. Check. We're off to a great start. Well, at least everybody's amused by her struggle to get the mic working. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, hello? Well, putting on a con has a lot of moving parts, and, there's a lot of tech things. Hello, tech? Anybody? Should we just
Checking 1, 2.
Is the sound system not on?
It's on here. Are you getting any level up front? You got nothing. Check 1, 2. Hey, hey. Hey, hey. There's 4. Nothing. Hey, hey. Check 1, 2. 1, 2. This is 3. I'll tell them to hold on for a second, and I'll put them back. Check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Nobody sang along. You're all fired. You're all
Charlie
fired.
was up here singing her heart out. And
Did anyone even hear me singing?
You missed all of it.
It was a beautiful rendition of a song by Chicago. I was trying to pay tribute to our host city. If you get me drunk enough later, maybe you'll hear it again. I don't know. No promises. All right. Let's get this show on the Knot Road.
It is so great to be here watching you in the darkness in front of us.
The darkness.
The darkness. We made it. We're
made
looking
it.
forward to, I think it would be 4.5 more days of WorldCon.
Yes!
And we...
Woo!
Charlie Jane, tell us a little bit about your trip to Chicago.
It was a little weird. I rode here on a unicorn, and I had to keep stopping every few yards to clean unicorn poop off my traveling pants, so I just got sparkles everywhere.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. That sounds complicated. All right, so what's your favorite movie about Chicago that's sort of science fictional in nature?
I'm just going to have to stand the Matrix films, which takes place in Chicago. It's like a post-apocalyptic world, and Chicago is still awesome. How about you, Annalie? What's your favorite, like, realistic documentary about Chicago?
Well, I think all of you probably know the film Rampage, which is the most realistic representation of Chicago and the most realistic representation of the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. As you know, there is an evil corporation in space. It's shooting CRISPR-Cas9 down onto Illinois right now. And it causes animals to grow to giant size, and only Dwayne Johnson can stop them. So that's why Rampage is such a great Chicago film.
It's a work of realism. So, Annalie, what are you excited to see in Chicago?
You know, I'm a transit nerd, so I've already been riding on the L, which is truly one of the greatest forms of transit I've seen in a long time. You know, the L is almost 130 years old. I highly recommend that if you haven't ridden it, you should try it. There's some old ironwork on it that's beautiful. You can buy a Ventra card, which is exciting, costs a little extra, but you get the, like, you know, pastel card. So yeah, that's
a good souvenir.
That's my main thing I'm looking forward to, is more riding on the trains.
So now we're thrilled to bring up the chair of Chicon 8, Helen Montgomery, to open the convention! Yes! Woo!
Woo.
Helen!
Probably good I can't see any of you. Hello to all of you here in Chicago and watching online. Welcome to Chicon 8, the 80th World Science Fiction Convention.
Woo!
I am so thrilled that you're all here and you're joining us this weekend. Thank you for being a part of this amazing see, I knew I was going to call. All right. Thank you for being a part of this amazing experience, our annual celebration of the science fiction and fantasy genre and our fandom that loves it. Chicago has had a long and storied history with Worldcon. The very second Worldcon ever was held here back in 1940, and today we host it in Chicago for a record 8th time. The city itself is a place that I love dearly, even though I no longer live here. I'm so happy to be able to share it with you. For those of you who are here on site, I really hope you're going to take time to explore the city, whether you're on our own or with other groups of fans, one of our fringe things. And for those of you who are attending virtually, we made sure that you get to experience it as well. We have several virtual items that are talking about Chicago. So everybody gets to experience the city. It has been a long and winding journey to get here today. We are the third pandemic Worldcon, which is not a phrase I ever thought I would be uttering, but we are the third pandemic Worldcon. For a while after being selected, you know, we had no idea whether or not we would be able to gather in person at all. Once we decided that yes, we could be in person, we had no idea how many of you would come. We didn't know if we would end up having to cancel it at the last minute because of the pandemic. We just didn't know anything about what was going to happen. During the last 2 years, we had staff who have had to step away due to real life issues. We had one of our guests of honor, Earl Korshak, pass away in 2021. Earlier this year, another guest of honor, Charles DeLint, had to step away due to his wife Marianne's illness. Our artist guest of honor, Floyd Norman, had to step down as well. And so I want to say to all of our friends who retired, to Earl somewhere, Charles and Marianne and Floyd, you have been in our thoughts as we continued on with planning Chicon 8, and you are still a part of this event. So, a long time ago in college, I had a professor who would tell us all the time that we should all learn to live with uncertainty. Thanks, Dr. Joe, wherever you are. My incredible team of volunteers has learned to live with uncertainty. We all have, all of you who are here, those of you watching online, and that is what we have done. But for the staff, you know, we had to plan for so many different possibilities. We had to adapt as situations changed rapidly. So when you see somebody this weekend who's wearing a staff badge, please stop them and say thank you. Please, as we go through this weekend, you know, for a lot of people, some of my staff included, this is one of the first times in years that we've gotten together in a group this big. And it's remarkable how quickly we forget how to be around people in groups this big. So with our staff, with each other, with the hotel staff, with everyone, kindness and patience are so important this weekend, folks, as we get back on this. And so that's my first request of you. Show each other kindness, show each other patience. And if we do that, this weekend is going to be amazing. And as I said, when you see the staff in particular, if you see them, please do thank them. Unless they're running somewhere, in which case don't get in their way. Just find them later. So, and in fact, I would actually like to just take a moment to thank them now. Are we able to pull up the house lights for a second? My tech crew is just like, Helen, this wasn't in the script. All right. Are any of my staff members in the audience? Can you stand up? And so here we are. Finally, this day has come. We are here in Chicago. It's time. I present to you all the 80th World Science Fiction Convention. Chicon 8 is officially open.
And for our first guest tonight here at Chicon, we'd like to introduce you to Brian Keith Ellison, the owner of BKE Designs. He provides specialty design services, primarily in wood, and he is the designer of this year's Hugo Award. And now the mystery of whether the mic is working.
So BK, your Hugo base is so gorgeous. It's so wonderful, and I've just been staring at it for hours. And so could you walk us through like the process of creating it, and what does it represent?
Well, I'll walk everybody through that.
Please
Yes.
do. Yes,
I'll walk
I love
everybody
it.
through. The concept for my design was, let's get the video, please. There is a video.
Okay, well, we just keep talking. Hopefully.
Oh, there it is, yeah. Use the Chicago flag to pay tribute not only to the wonderful city of Chicago, where I'm from, but also the theme of this year's convention, which is Take to the Stars. I also incorporated an Art Deco style nod to the concept of this design. And as a woodworker, each piece was handcrafted with the passion that I have for woodworking and furniture design. Guests of Chicon 8, the 2023 Hugo Award. Where is it? Where? Up.
There you go. You got it. It is so beautiful. Gaze upon the splendor. It's just so gorgeous.
Thank you.
It's even more gorgeous up close.
Yeah,
It's
this
so
is
beautiful.
so
Thank you.
awesome. So I know you have a machine shop where you work on your wood, and I'm wondering if you could tell us, do you have a favorite machine in there that you like to work with the most?
You know, I work out of a 10,000 square foot woodworking shop that's been in Chicago since 1923. And
Nice.
we have equipment in there that date back to the 1800s that we still use.
Wow.
And I'd have to say the oldest piece of equipment in there, the double trim saw, which is belt driven. It has like 64 different grease points that we have to monitor and maintain. I'd have to say that that's probably, our baby of the place.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think
We want a
1863.
tour.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. I'd love to take you.
So, what was it like to be a reality TV star?
Where'd that come from? No.
We ask everybody that.
Yeah,
You ask
that's
everybody
like
that, right?
Everyone who comes to stage
On
has
the
to ask.
street. I just-
No. All joking aside, I did have the opportunity to participate in a reality television competition that was it was like a furniture design version of America's Top Chef, where we had to design and make a piece of furniture in 24 hours. And name of the show is called Framework. It was on Spike. Spike's gone now, but you can find it on Hulu and YouTube and all that. But the experience was something I would never want to live through again. But it was an amazing experience in and of itself. I made some amazing friends there, and it was a 10-episode season, and I ended up appearing on 8 out of the 10 episodes. So,
Nice.
I did okay.
Wow.
But I was the oldest participant in the show as well. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
Sounds kind of intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, a big hand, everybody, for BK.
Thank you. So you want me to leave this here? You just leave this up here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to leave that out.
So, next on the agenda are the first Fandom Awards. And, okay. The first fandom was founded in 1958 to organize the science fiction fans of the Golden Era. This evening, they will present their 3 historic annual awards.
The first award is the First Fandom Hall of Fame. This prestigious achievement award was created in 1963 and has been presented each year to a living recipient who has made a significant contribution to science fiction throughout their lifetime. This year's award recipient is George W. Price. George was planning to be here until a few days ago, and he apologizes profusely for not being able to make it. In his absence, here to present the award is Vincent Doherty.
George W. Price was first introduced to science fiction in 1947. He became active in fandom in the early 1950s and was a member of the Philadelphia Science Fiction Society. His first convention was the 10th Worldcon, also known as Chicon 2 and TASFIC, here in Chicago in 1952. The following year, he joined the University of Chicago Science Fiction Club and was later elected president. He later became an early partner in Advent Publishing, which published scholarly articles and works about the SF field. Beginning in 1965, he hosted monthly SF parties at his home, which continued for 20 years. A technical writer, Army veteran, college graduate and chemical engineer, with a lifelong interest in limericks and puns, he has been an active SF fan for more than 70 years. George very much wanted to be here to accept his award in person, but decided that at his age and health, it would be best for someone else to accept it for him, which I'm delighted to do on his behalf. Thank you very much.
The first Fandom Posthumous Hall of Fame Award was created in 1994 to acknowledge people in science fiction who should have, but did not, receive deserved lifetime achievement recognition while they were living. Here to tell us more about the award is David Ritter.
Good evening. As we examine the history of the fiction we love, so many of the people that shaped fantasy and science fiction as authors, editors, and publishers can't be discussed without some qualification and controversy. I'm pleased to accept the first Fandom Posthumous Hall of Fame Award on behalf of August Derleth, founder of Arkham House. Thank you. While we may justifiably judge Derleth for his involvement with, and some would say exploitation of, H.P. Lovecraft, there remains in Derleth's legacy a monumental contribution to the development of the fantasy genre. At this convention, through the 1946 project, we're looking back 75 years to the time immediately following World War II. This was a time of change for the country and the world. This prominent publisher and author had a disproportionate impact on the field throughout the 1940s and had a particularly remarkable year in 1946. Derleth's company published 7 books that year, including seminal titles such as Slan by A.E. Van Vogt, the X-Men of its day, Skullface and Others, the first collection of Robert E. Howard's fantasy stories, The Doll and One Other by Algernon Blackwood, The Hounds of Tyndalos by Frank Belknap Long, West India Lights by Henry S. Whitehead, and the epic fantasy The House on the Borderlands by William Hope Hodgson. In addition, he was in deep collaboration with Ray Bradbury, preparing for the 1947 release of Bradbury's first collection, Dark Carnival. Over the span of Derleth's 32-year stewardship, Arkham House would publish over 80 titles. At the same time, Derleth was writing stories based on his Sherlock Holmes knockoff, Solar Ponds, submitting his weird fiction to Weird Tales under his own name and as Stephen Brendan. 3 of his stories were published in 1946. And crafting an instructional book intended, quote, as an inquiry into some lesser realized aspects of creative writing made out of one writer's experience. He was continuing work on his series of historical dramas set in his home state of Wisconsin, episodes of the 50-novel Sauk Prairie Saga. The man was famously not afraid of self-promotion. In a self-published booklet titled August Derleth, 20 Years of Writing, 1925 to 1946, he described himself thusly. Hobbies: fencing, swimming, hiking, chess, stamp collecting, and collecting comic strips. This dizzying font of energy is a burly-chested blonde, a champion letter writer to the press, the watchdog of politics on which he writes and distributes broadsides. In spite of his incredible prolificity, his work, including his poetry, is not superficial. And he is considered a leading authority on regionalism in American literature. His Judge Peck mysteries are the best of their kind. Sinclair Lewis wrote about Derleth in Esquire in November 1945. When he was very young, he had a notion worthy of a giant, and with gigantic industry, he has pursued it. He has stayed home and built up a solid work that demands the attention of anybody who believes that American fiction is at last growing up. Yet he is also a burly, bounding, bustling, self-confident, opinionated, and highly sweatered young man with faults so grievous that a melancholy perusal of them may be of more value to apprentices than a study of his serious virtues. Ray Bradbury, Robert E. Howard, Robert Bloch, A.E. Van Vogt, Donald Wandrei, Clark Ashton Smith, Frank Belknap Long, Henry S. Whitehead, all published by Arkham House in the 1940s. Would we know these authors as we do today without August Derleth's burly, bounding, bustling, gigantic industry? Grievous faults and serious virtues, worthy of remembering. Thank you very much.
The next presentation will be the Sam Moskowitz Archive Award. Sam Moskowitz assembled one of the world's most complete collections of science fiction. This award was created in 1998 to recognize not only an impressive collection of science fiction material, but also what has actually been done with it. Here to make this year's presentation is Stephen D. Korshak.
Good evening, thank you. Doug Ellis and Deb Fulton run one of the most important pulp conventions that focuses on original artwork, pulps, films, covering the past history of the field the annual Windy City Pulp and Paper Convention. This is an important convention. It helps preserve the history of our field. Doug and Deb are major collectors of artwork and pulp magazines who generously share their holdings with other fans. They've conducted significant research and written important books that help perpetuate the memory of past genre artists. Doug is the author of dozens of essays, and with Deb, has edited and published Pulp Vault for more than 20 years. It's for the unique collection that they've assembled and for the service that they've given to the field for decades that the members of First Fandom have selected Doug Ellis and Deb Fulton to be the well-deserved recipients of the Sam Moskowitz Award for 2022. Doug and Deb.
We'd like to thank First Fandom for this award. Obviously, Sam Moskowitz was instrumental in launching the first Worldcon, so we're thrilled to be able to accept this at our hometown Worldcon. We're very honored and excited to receive it, joining several of our collector friends who have previously received it, including Steve Korshak, Kevin Cook, and the late Frank Robinson, Rusty Hevelin, and Bob Weinberg. We've enjoyed collecting and sharing our collection with others at the Windy City Pulp and Paper Convention, the World Fantasy Convention, and other venues, and we've enjoyed helping others with their own collections. We look forward to continuing to do so. Thank you very much.
To present the Big Heart Award, we welcome Sue Francis. She and Steve Francis received the Big Heart Award themselves back in 2001.
Good evening. It is time to present the Big Heart Award for 2022. This award was first presented to E. Doc Smith in 1959. To date, 77 people have been so honored. The Big Heart is the highest service award given to a fan or pro for their effort to improve the quality of science fiction and fantasy literature and to make our community a more welcoming place for anyone interested in the genre. Maintaining old friendships and welcoming new people into fandom are two of the many tributes of persons selected to receive this award. A brief history of the Big Heart Award and a list of past winners have been posted on the display board near the First Fandom material. This year's award recipient has been active in fandom for at least 4 decades and can be found working behind the scenes at regional conventions and at Worldcons on 2 continents. This person was a senior member of the committees for AussieCon 2, 3, and 4. He was fan guest of honor at Concave in 2012 and has been returning to the convention ever since. He could always be found helping in the con suite and making it a friendly place in the wee hours of the night. More about him can be found on the Big Heart Award display board. The David A. Kyle Big Heart Award for 2022 goes to Mark Lenneman. Mark, would you please come to the podium? Okay. Do you want to stand up or? I'm going to stand up. Okay. And here you are, Mark.
Thank you. I'm stunned. I'm stunned that anyone knows who I am, among other things. Yeah, I have been working behind the scenes for a while, and I've managed to get one entire fan guest of honorship for the past 40 years, so I guess that's why I'm surprised right now. Those of us who toil behind the scenes, who do things like site selection, run parties, work at bids, there are a lot of us out there, and people tend not to be recognized. And I'm glad that I could be recognized as a representative of all those people. And thank you very much. I'm pretty glad I came tonight.
Sorry?
Pretty glad I came tonight.
Well, I am here, thank you.
Excuse me while I read get that.
Oh, this is the desk.
Not drive off.
Please don't.
Let's not drive off the podium.
No, please don't.
I'm sorry, I can't see.
He can't.
Lights.
Can I have a guy?
Yay.
Sorry about the delay, folks.
No worries. Please welcome back to the stage Helen Montgomery, the chair of Chicon 8, to present a special committee award.
All right. So each year, the WorldCon has an opportunity to present a special committee award to recognize a person or a group for their contributions to our fandom. This year, we have chosen to recognize a group of people who have, for almost 30 years, volunteered their time and skills to create and maintain a resource for our community, the Internet Speculative Fiction Database. The person who first suggested that we honor ISFDB had the following to say. It says, every time I look something up, I benefit from the donated work of some devoted bibliophile and from that of other ISFDB contributors who verified the correctness of the entry. These people have built a marvelous edifice of knowledge as a gift to all of us. Multiple people over the years have praised the ISFDB. Cory Doctorow once said, it was the best all-around guide to things science fictional, remains the Internet Speculative Fiction Database. On Tor.com, James Davis Nichol described the site as the single best SFF bibliographical resource there is. The collective of people who created this amazing resource have never been truly recognized by a WorldCon until today. The Chicon 8 Convention Committee is delighted to present our special committee award to the Internet Speculative Fiction Database. To accept the award, we are delighted to welcome a fellow Chicagoan, the original creator of the ISFDB, Al Von Ruff.
Well, thanks, Helen, and thanks to the Chicon Committee for this distinguished award. So it's convention to go ahead and thank a bunch of people when you win an award, but there's two problems. One is that it's kind of dull, and the second is the ISFDB has been a community project for 27 years, so there's like literally tens of thousands of people. So instead, I'm just going to pick some highlights. These are people or institutions, and I'll try to sprinkle a little history on it to make it a little spicier. So, number one. So for older folks like me who had a PC before the internet, the go-to place was something called Usenet. And the killer app on Usenet was the news groups. And there are probably people in this audience who spent a lot of time on rec.arts.sf.written. And one of the things that popped up regularly on that news group were bibliographies. And there were a number of people who did this over the years, but by the late 80s, John Wynn was a pretty prolific poster of bibliographies, and I don't have any problem saying that we heavily cribbed that format for the initial version of the ISFDB. So thanks to John Wynn, and thanks to the people who contributed to that news group to help popularize that format. All right, number two, there was a prolific poster on rec.arts.sf.written named Ahasuerus, and he seemed to know the answer to almost any kind of question about speculative fiction. And In mid-95, I sent him an email to go take a look at some stuff I had put together, and he became like the unofficial co-designer of the ISFDB. And taught me a lot about bibliography and taught me a lot about like book collecting and kind of things that people were looking for when they were collecting books. But usually this training came in the form of a terse email that would say something like, okay, but what about pseudonyms? So thanks to Ahasuerus. Number 3, people wonder, why did the ISFDB do it? Because it's kind of obvious, you know, you have bibliographies, there's databases, there's the internet, so how was it that we became the first in terms of its success? And the answer would be someone you probably don't know, Eric Bina. And that's a name that you probably should know. So in the early 90s, I worked downstate in Champaign-Urbana at a Motorola site. I was running a networking team. And Eric Bina had an office around the corner. He was on the graphics team, and every day he would come in and claim that the networking code was broken. And in 91, he decided to change jobs. He went down to the NCSA, where they worked on a variety of projects. And in 92, he was paired with a guy named Mark Andreessen, and they were tasked to go work on something called a graphical web browser. And as they were building it, they would put copies on a little magnetic tape, because that's what we did in those days, and they'd bring it back to the Motorola site, and we'd put it on our servers and try it out. And I had a set of Unix command line, I don't want to call them bibliography tools, but they were pseudo bibliography tools, and there wasn't a lot of internet content because there wasn't a web browser. So I thought, how hard would it be to combine those two things together? And so that was the initial prototype for the ISFDB, developed at the same time Mosaic was developed, and both of those guys went on to be co-founders of Netscape, and you know what happened after that. The fourth and final thing would be, once the ISFDB was started, it was like a snowball, and the more data we accumulated, the easier it was to accumulate more data. So there have been many, many folks who have donated their private databases, but the biggest donation in the 90s, which I call the data acquisition years, was NESFA. And so NESFA donated their index to the ISFDB. That index came out of the old MIT index, which is probably one of the very first databases put together on punch cards at MIT. And so those are the 4 folks or institutions I'd like to thank. And once again, thanks to the committee for the recognition, and thanks to everybody else. Okay.
I have to find it. Here we go. Unless, do you want to introduce them? They're here. They're here.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, yay! All right.
Now we'd like to give a warm welcome to Janie Pochel and Anthony Tamez, who are both organizers with Chi Nations Youth Council, an indigenous youth organization here in Chicago.
So, Chi Nations worked with the city of Chicago to convert a vacant lot into a park full of gorgeous art that's now called the First Nations Garden, where indigenous Chicagoans can grow plants and have community events, and everyone can enjoy the beauty that they've created in a space that wasn't being used. We are just so incredibly lucky to have y'all here to give us a land acknowledgement during these opening ceremonies. So give it up for Chi Nations and for Janie and Anthony.
Bonjour, everybody. My name is Janie Pochel. I'm an auntie of the Chi Nations Youth Council. Chi Nation started 10 years ago with the mission to create safe space for Native youth through arts, activism, and education. As they've already announced, we have a First Nations garden, which is a safe place for Native youth, free of most of the harmful things that happen to Native youth in the city of Chicago. We try to make a safe place for them. Now we got Anthony, who's going to read our land acknowledgement.
Bonjour, ani iskune anini nindisnaka iskagu nindunzaba ameknadudum. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Temez Posel. I'm West Pacific First Nations Cree, Sicangu, Lakota, and Black, and a member of the Chi Nations Youth Council. And the land acknowledgement today that we're going to read to you was passed in 2018 when we worked with Alderman Carlos Rosa, and it was one of the first land acknowledgements that the city of Chicago had did, and it obviously went through a round of revisions. But I'm going to read it in the resolution language because I think that that is important for people to hear. And keep in mind when I'm reading it, Native youth put this together, and it's not often heard of that Native youth get to put resolutions or legislation forth in their local governments. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges that Chicago, formerly known as Chigagun, pronounced Zigagu, to the Native people, sits on the edge of multiple ecosystems, including swamp, oak savanna, and prairie, with waterways connecting the Mississippi River and Great Lakes. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges it sits upon ancestral homeland to the Anishinaabeg, Niswi, Muskotawin, Council of Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi, along with dozens of tribes who cultivated and molded the land to sustainably suit their needs since time immemorial. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges that an acknowledgement of the land is an indigenous protocol performed on indigenous lands across the globe. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges Anishinaabewin for providing the names of Chicago and Lake Michigan, along with multiple territories, waterways, roads, and parks in and around Chicago. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges that the treaties made with the people of the Three Fires have not been honored, and the destruction and disposition of land and life of indigenous peoples continues until this day. It's important to remember that treaties go two ways, and it's up to all people occupying native land to uphold those treaties of your government. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges that colonialism is an ongoing structure we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation to deconstruct the romanticisms of forced removal and to prevent further genocide of remaining indigenous peoples. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges it is currently home to over 75,000 American Indians known as urban natives who keep their tribal kinship and cultures spanning from over 150 tribal nations. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges and supports the modern indigenous people of Chicago, along with those who view Chicago as their ancestral territory and continue to practice their kinship, culture, harvest their medicines and foods that continue to grow in and around Chicago. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the city of Chicago acknowledges the land we occupy as indigenous homelands and have great appreciation and gratitude to those whose territory we occupy. And be it further resolved, the city of Chicago acknowledges the remarkable resilience of indigenous peoples and American Indian community that continue to practice their tribal and intertribal cultures while flourishing in modern-day Chicago and continue to enhance our great city's beauty. Miigwech, thank you.
Can I give a thank you to Charlie, Jane, and Annalee for putting us in touch with Chi Nations? Thank you for doing that.
That was so awesome. Chicago is one of the only cities in the country, as far as I know, that actually has an official land acknowledgement. So go Chicago.
Yet another reason to love the Windy City. So, Helen, what are you looking forward to at Chicon this year?
I think I'm supposed to say when it's done and I can sleep. You know, our team has just put together an amazing weekend, right? The program is phenomenal. We have theater, we have concerts, we have a brilliant dealer's room, we have all kinds of really cool exhibits. We have the entire virtual Chicon 8, which is a ridiculous amount of programming and virtual exhibits and social time. And the reality is I'm looking forward to so much I'm not going to be able to do it all. But you know, the highlights for me, I think, are certainly the Hugo Awards ceremony, anything with our guests of honor and our special guests and our Toastmasters. We have some great science programming as well, some really cool looking items. And then I think the other things for me that are the don't miss items, I love art. I love science fiction based art, right? And this year, and folks will hear about it, but both our fan guests of honor, Joseph Clary and Edie Stern, are art collectors, and Earl Korshak, who is our guest of honor, has also a phenomenal art collection. And I'm so excited because both of them, they brought their collection here. You are going to have the opportunity to see over 100 amazing pieces of art from dating back to like the 40s in some cases. And so those are don't miss for me. Joe and Edie's collection is in our art show, which is in the Regency Ballroom, and the Korshak collection is over in the San Francisco room right across from that, and I cannot wait to get over there to see those.
Is there anything that attendees should know or look out for?
I think we all have to look out for each other this weekend, as I said earlier, right? This is kind of weird to be with all these people again, and you know, kindness and patience, and you know, trust that we are working so hard to try to make things work for you. You know, if you come to us with something, we will listen to you, and we will work and do the best we can to fix it. But keep an eye on our newsletter, which is on the website. That's going to always have lots of updated information. Social media will always have lots of updated information, and we're just going to try to keep you informed as best we can with everything. So, but those are the two main resources.
Awesome. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you both. Our Toastmasters, y'all. All right.
So Annalie, can you tell us about the brain implant you're wearing tonight? Who designed it for you, and what is it telling you?
Oh my God, thank you for asking. People don't notice my brain implant enough. This is an original Toho Studios implant. It's an import, very rare. And what it does is it gives me basically a photographic memory of all of the Gojira movies from the 60s and 70s. So like, I am all up on Gojira versus the Smog Monster, also known as Hedorah. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of the brain implant is that I've forgotten everything I ever knew about Anne of Green Gables, so it's a little, I think it's probably gonna be okay. Charlie Jane, why don't you tell us about the algorithmically designed dress that you're wearing? What are some of the other things that the algorithm came up with before it came up with this?
Well, so as you might know, I recently transcended being a femme and became a femme cubed, or as I prefer to call it, a trans tesseract, which means that my femininity exists for 3 hours that last for 7 years. And my dress, basically, it's a hyper-intelligent, self-generating hologram that just like follows me around, but there's also an army of other dresses that are also following me around that will both smite my enemies and provide for instantaneous costume changes in the event of any, costume emergency.
Wow, that's awesome. I like that smiting the enemies part. I think we all need that.
I mean, fashion that smites the enemies is really, that's the next frontier of fashion, I think. You know, it's really, I mean, for too long, us, hypercube femmes have had to rely purely on stiletto heels as an offensive weapon, whereas, an army of like self-aware dresses that can just like jump out of the shadows and wrap themselves around people, highly underrated. So Annalie, I have a slightly more serious question for you. What are you working on right now? What do you got coming up?
Well, thanks for asking. I'm really excited. I have a novel coming out in January called The Terraformers, which is a multi-generational epic about a group of people 60,000 years in the future who are terraforming a bespoke Earth-like world made by a small boutique real estate development firm, and the kind of clash between the people developing this world and the people who own that world. What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm doing copy edits on Promises Stronger Than Darkness, the third book in my young adult trilogy, which I think all I can really tell you is it's queerer and sillier and weirder and more just like everything than the first two books, and I might read a little bit of it tomorrow. And also, I'm working on some scripts for Marvel Comics for New Mutants, so that's exciting. All right, so now.
All right, so we have a ton of incredible guests of honor at Chicon this year, and we're going to be introducing all of them to you tonight. There's one who can't be here this evening, unfortunately, so we're going to start with her.
Dr. Eve L. Ewing is a native of Chicago who is a writer of both books and comics, a scholar and an organizer. The Chicago Tribune called her a truly rare cultural phenomenon, an artist who not only holds up a mirror to society, but makes herself a catalyst to change it. Ewing is a prolific writer across multiple genres, from history to poetry to comics to young adult. She has written many projects for Marvel Comics, including Ironheart 1 through 12, Marvel Team Up 1 through 3, Champions 1 through 5, Outlawed, and has been a co-author on several more. Marvel just announced that Ewing is the writer for a 5-issue limited series, Monica Rambeau Photon, which will be available beginning in December of 2022, and I cannot wait. In addition, she is the author of 4 books, has been on both CNN and The Daily Show, and is the winner of too many awards to list. No, really, she has at least 30. Dr. Eve L. Ewing will be appearing in virtual Chicon 8 in the Airmeet 2 room beginning at 4 p.m. tomorrow in an interview with Michi Trota. Don't miss it.
All right, so our real life
Can we get a round of applause
Yeah.
for Eve L. Ewing? Yeah? Let's do that, please.
Our next guest is Jean Ha. Jean Ha is the artist on Wonder Woman Historia, The Amazons Volume 2, with writer Kelly Sue DeConnick from DC Comics. He's drawn Alan Moore's Top 10 and sundry Marvel and DC superhero comics. He won 4 Eisner Awards, the highest award in American comics. Jean draws and writes May from Oni Press. It's the story of May Fortell, a girl who follows her long missing sister Abby to a world of mad science and mystery. All right, welcome, Jean Ha.
Glad to be here.
Okay.
I love being at science fiction conventions because they'll constantly be having ideas thrown at your head that get your gears whirring and you can't stop it.
Nice.
So the Trans-Tesseract dress, which is bigger on the inside of the 4th dimension than it is on the outside. It's the projection to the 3rd dimension, into our 3rd dimension. Is just, it keeps whirring, and it's kind of like, oh, and then on the 3rd section of the dress, you keep going, and then there's a swimming pool and a dance floor, and I'm not the person to fully explore this idea, but I mean, I want
think
someone
you
to.
might be, actually. We need to talk about this later.
I'm looking forward to the panels.
This is my favorite moment ever because I'm a huge admirer of your work, and to hear you take my loopy idea and just build it out like that, that's just like, I think there's a recording of it because I'm going to want to rewatch it. That was incredible. I am just like literally vibrating right now. So my first question for you is one that might be kind of a personal topic for me personally, which is what advice do you have for prose writers? I know that they exist, prose writers, who want to get into writing comic scripts that might be that might be useful for comic artists to be able to draw.
Okay. In a few cases, I've met some prose writers who just instantly turned out to have mastery over the comics form. All of a sudden, my brain is completely blanking out. My Justice League writer, Brad Meltzer, who told me, I want you to, on every page, to make the panels smaller as the ceiling of the floor collapse a little more and make the gap between the panels, the gutters, bigger and bigger. And I was like, by the end of the book, I'm barely going to be doing any drawing. I kind of feel guilty. Can I just make the images more close up? And he's like, trust me on this. So it was the easiest book to draw ever because I was barely doing anything in the last pages. And the story worked exactly as they said it would, and it was completely claustrophobic at the end. And we won. That was my last Eisner that I won. So it's kind of
Nice.
so if you are a Brad Meltzer, don't listen to your artist. But otherwise, if you don't have mastery of the comics form already, someone on the team needs to understand how comic storytelling works. And if it's you, that's great. If it's the artist, that's great. If it's neither of you, find a really good editor and a layout artist.
So you've worked with Alan Moore.
Yes.
So tell us about what his scripts are like. Are they just incredibly long? Like, do you have to kind of have a forklift, or how does that work?
They are long, but they're fun. He has a really good writing voice, so they're fun to read. It's very chatty, where he'll talk about, "Hi, how are you doing?" More interesting than that, because I am not Alan Moore. But it's very chatty, introductory, how he's doing, how you're doing, what he wants to accomplish to the story. And then he'll describe the scenes in a very systematic way, where he describes how the heads show up in reading order in the panel, and it'll just order the balloons in reading order in the panel, and everything. If you follow it like a cookbook recipe, you will have a perfectly clockwork working comic book story that even if you're an artist who's not good at comic book storytelling, it'll still work. But he also trusts you that if you are better at him than visual storytelling, go crazy and just go a little bit off from the script, and it works.
Awesome.
Nice.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So,
Jean Ha.
yeah, this is Jean Ha.
Future artist of the Trans Tesseract dress.
So next up, excellent artists abound in the Chicago area, and it is our absolute pleasure to have Eric Wilkerson here with us tonight. Eric Wilkinson is a Chesley Award-winning art illustrator and concept artist whose client list, it's so amazing. It includes Wizards of the Coast, Weta Workshop, Marvel, Dark Horse Comics, Scholastic, and Disney Publishing, to name a few. He illustrated Colin Kaepernick's New York Times bestselling book, I Color Myself Different. He has created art for film, TV, advertising, publishing, comics, and video games, a graduate of the School of Visual Arts. Eric teaches illustration while also focusing on painting people of color having out-of-this-world adventures. Eric Wilkerson!
Hey. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
All right, so what's the difference between designing Magic the Gathering cards and designing book covers?
Oh, boy. Well, with a book cover, I'm given an entire manuscript. I'm given, very clear descriptions, or sometimes not, actually. Let me think about that. Sometimes for a book cover, I'm given nothing but a paragraph.
Wow.
And the book's not even finished, they haven't even finished writing the book. They just know of a cool scene. Other times I'm given the full manuscript. But with a Magic card, there have been concept artists that worked for weeks, months, designing entire worlds, characters, props, environments, everything. And they give you a PDF document, which is like over 200 pages of concept art. And they'll basically say, we want you to take this planeswalker, and we want you to put him in this background, doing this thing, and make it look cool, and we need it in 6 weeks. Go. Wow. So there's challenges with both, but they're both very exciting projects to be on. So
awesome.
Yeah, I love your art so much, and anybody who hasn't already checked out Eric's Instagram, go and check it out. It's just full of incredible, beautiful, breathtaking images, and also the cover of the program book is also incredibly beautiful and breathtaking.
Yeah, which is so amazing.
So, yes, it's freaking amazing.
Smash that follow button. Smash it.
Yes.
All right? I crave attention, please.
But there's not enough reels.
I'm gonna, if I have to do that, if I have to sing and dance and do a little thing.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
I mean, we're not going to say no, though.
But, so after looking at your Instagram, one thing that struck me is I love that you draw so many powerful people who are really happy. And why do you think it's important for people who are powerful to actually show joy?
Well, I mean, there's so many other illustrators that have made really great livings doing badass characters, doing really violent stuff, and just, you know, I mean, you can have a person look cool and engaging, and they don't have to be, you know, doing anything really gross or violent. But I'm also, my stuff is also leaning toward a different demographic. I'm leaning toward, a lot of my work leans toward children, you know, like middle grade publishing and things like that. So it can't be too violent. It's got to be cool to sell a product, but it can't be too excessively violent. So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I like doing something that would appeal to a 10-year-old. You know, like if I were that kid walking through the store and I just see that and go, oh my God, mommy, I need that. You know, that's the response it gets. So, you know, that makes me really happy.
That's great. I'm glad for all the 10-year-olds who are finding that too.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
Eric,
All right.
Eric Wilkinson.
Woo! All right, our next guests that we're going to introduce you to are our fan guests of honor, Edie Stern and Joe Siclari. Hello. Edie, sit on down. Edie can honestly claim to be a part of Second Fandom as she started reading science fiction in 1959. She's been active in SF fandom for over 50 years, chairing cons, running fan groups, organizing science fiction art exhibitions. She's been webmaster for the Fan History Project since 2016, which you should definitely check out, and runs the Fan History YouTube channel. All of that apparently is not enough to fill up all her time after retiring as a distinguished engineer from IBM, being granted 205 patents, holy crap, and winning the Kate Gleason Award for Lifetime Achievement from the American Society of Mechanical Engineers in 2012. She is also Vice President of Amicus Brain, an AI technology startup. All right, welcome, Edie.
Joe Siclari, her co-fan guest of honor, has been a fan even longer than his wife, Edie. Joe has been active in almost every aspect of fandom. He has published over 100 fanzines, many convention publications, and started several SF clubs and conventions, chaired MagicCon, the 50th WorldCon in 1992, and has worked on hundreds of other conventions. In 2005, Joe was elected as the Down Under Fan Fund, DUF, delegate, and in 2016, Joe and his wife Edie were recipients of the Fanish Big Heart Award. That not being enough to fill up his time, since 1994, Joe has chaired the FANAC Fan History Project, which has put up over 175,000 pages of fan material online at the Fan History Project, and also sponsors Fancyclopedia 3 and the Fan History YouTube channel. He has written about fandom for science fiction reference books. He co-edited the Hugo-nominated WorldCon Guest of Honor speeches with Mike Resnick, and published Harry Warner's A Wealth of Fable. Let's give a huge round of applause to Chicon's fan guest of honor, Edie Stern and Joe Siclari. Thank you.
So in the exhibit hall, you can see a lot of documents from the FANAC Fan History Project, and there's even more online. So definitely go check it out in the exhibition hall. But I wonder if you two could tell us about whether there's a particular item or document in the collection that more fans should know about.
That's for you. There are a number of publications on there that are, I guess you could call them significant. There are actually probably, I would say, different fanzine titles that have been important. Early on, back in the early 1940s, Harry Warner Jr. Published a fanzine called Spaceways that had probably the best reputation up to that time amongst a wide range of fans. Previously, there had been things like Fantasy Magazine and Science Fiction Digest, which were exceptionally standout, but they didn't have as wide an interest as I think Spaceways did. Later on, as fans changed, some of their attitudes changed. One of my favorites was done by a woman who later became a great friend of ours, Lee Hoffman.
And a Chicon fan guest of honor.
In 1982, yes. And she published a fanzine called Quandary. And it got that title because she misspelled it. It was supposed to be Quandary, and she left out the A when she did the stencil for the title. But it attracted some of the best people at the time to write for her. And my other favorite fanzine is Hyphen, which was done by Walt Willis, who was a contributor also to Quandary. And he is one of the best writers who has ever appeared in fandom and in any kind of fanzine. Those are a couple of the ones that I think are the best.
Let me jump in a little bit too. Fandom contains multitudes. So whatever you like, it had a precursor. And precursors tended to happen a while ago, and fans wrote about it. So if it's cosplay that you like, or comics, or Star Trek, or anything, check out the archive, the digital archive, and you're likely to find the early writing on it, the precursors to it, embarrassing photos, you know, all of the things that people want to document. So that's what we do. We're trying to archive some of the artifacts of our collective past.
That's so amazing, and it's so important for us to be able to remember our fan histories, that we know where all the things we love came from. So I understand that you've got a special exhibition at the art show, and you're leading some tours. So what kind of things can we expect to see in the special exhibition, and what would we see on the tours that you're leading?
So among other things, we like to collect art. When you work on conventions, you have the opportunity to see some impressive art, things that tickle your imagination. And if you have walls to fill, you may end up being an art collector. So what we've got downstairs, or across and downstairs, is about 40 pieces from our collection. And we're going to take people around that are interested and tell them what we have and why we have it and why we like it.
We started doing this just with some very small pieces and with prints. And eventually we got to working on conventions. We got to meet some of the artists. And every once in a while, we could afford to get a piece of original art starting out. Then we were lucky enough to meet more people who like the same type of thing. And it is the kind of thing that can become almost addictive. But to me, there's nothing better than to find a piece that you just fell in love with when it was on the cover of a magazine or a book, and 50 years later find that that is available for you to get, if you can afford it, but prices have gone up. But it is just a wonderful thing. There was one of those pieces that's actually sitting in the show. And we'll be glad to talk about those. This particular one is by John Schoenherr. And we do hope that everyone will come down and at least take a look at that. And there is another special art exhibit as well to take a look at.
All right, well, thank you so much for preserving our history. I know some of it lives in your basement in New York, and so I'm just incredibly grateful that you're making it available online so we can all visit your basement. And that is super awesome. That's like my dream, is to just basically go into an archive that reveals all this history. So thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're immensely sad to announce that Early Korshak, one of our guests of honor, passed away on August 25, 2021. Early was instrumental in bringing Worldcon to Chicago for the first time in 1940, And because of that, we are here today for the 8th Chicago WorldCon, Chicon 8. Early was so excited to be our guest of honor, and he told us so in every conversation the convention had with him. Early Korshak first stumbled on science fiction when an issue of Astounding crossed his path in August 1934. 5 years later, he created Moonstruck Press to compile a bibliography of every fantasy book published to that date. He also became one of the driving forces behind the Second World Science Fiction Convention, which was also a Chicon, held in here from September 1st through 2nd, 1940, exactly 82 years before Chicon 8. Wow. By making sure that WorldCon became an annual event, Early helped create the fanish culture we celebrate every year at WorldCon.
Following World War II, Korshak formed Shasta Publishers to release Everett K. Bleiler's The Checklist of Fantastic Literature. Over the next 10 years, Shasta published collections by L. Sprague de Camp, Murray Leinster, Robert Heinlein, and other early science fiction authors. After Shasta went out of business, Korshak dropped out of organized fandom for 3 decades before starting to attend conventions again in the late 1980s. He was inducted into the first Fandom Hall of Fame in 1996, and in 2009, he revived Shasta as Shasta Phoenix to publish classic SF art. He is represented here at Chicon by his son, Steve Korshak. Let's give him a second big Chicago welcome in honor of his father, Early Korshak. Thanks so much for being here, Steve. Which of your father's accomplishments do you think he would be most proud of in the science fiction field?
So my father was part of an early fan movement. Back in 1939 at the first World Science Fiction Convention, there were less than 50 or 60 people at this convention. And it was a movement for them to educate, motivate, and really change the world with science fiction. And in those days, people didn't think about robots or computers or space travel, and today we take that for granted. And it's a lot because of the early fans that he was involved with helped push the literature that inspired people to make these changes. So I think he was very proud of being part of this early fan movement to try to change the world, among other things that he did.
So we understand that you have 3 exhibits here at WorldCon. There's an exhibit on the Shasta Publishers, a photo memorial on Early's role in fandom, and your own art collection. So can you tell us about what we're going to see in those?
Sure. So there's a photo exhibition on Earl and early fandom, and it's in the dealer's room. There's some photos of Earl with some of those early fans. And in addition to that, there's as you mentioned, the art collection. Earl helped inspire that by inadvertently putting a Jail in St. John painting into my bedroom. And little did he realized that he indoctrinated me into the field at that point. It was like drinking Kool-Aid. And I got this sense of wonder that all of us have in this field. And then he was gracious enough to give me a couple of the early Shasta dust jacket covers that were used, the artwork that was used for those. And then he and I started off on a quest to try to assemble a collection of iconic illustrations from the last 140 years. In Earl's later years, my wife Alma filled in, and we continued. So that art collection is down around the corner from the dealer's room, and I think people will enjoy that along with Joe and Edie's collection, and as well as the art room itself. There's a lot of great art at this show.
Well, thank you so much for telling us more about Earl Korshak, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Steve Korshak.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we'd like to welcome our guests of honor, Stephen Barnes and Tananarive Dew. Stephen Barnes is the New York Times bestselling author of over 30 novels of science fiction, horror, and suspense. The Image, Endeavor, and Cable Ace award-winning author also writes for television, including The Twilight Zone, Stargate SG-1, Andromeda, and an Emmy Award-winning episode of The Outer Limits. Stephen Barnes has also taught at UCLA, Seattle University, and has lectured at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C.
Tananarive Due is an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She is an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary, Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. It's an incredible series. A leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years, Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, a British Fantasy Award, and her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies, many, many of them. Together, they have created online courses in Afrofuturism, Black horror, and screenwriting. They wrote A Small Town for season 2 of Jordan Peele's The Twilight Zone on Paramount+, and 2 segments of Shudder's anthology film, Horror Noir. They also co-wrote their upcoming Black horror graphic novel, The Keeper, which was illustrated by Marco Finnegan.
Stephen and Tananarive also co-host a podcast, Life Writing, Write for Your Life. Please welcome to Chicon our guests of honor, Stephen Barnes and Tananarive Due.
By the way, I wanted to add one thing to the list of television credits. I also wrote 4 episodes of Baywatch.
Did you meet David Hasselhoff?
Huh?
Did you meet David Hasselhoff?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I met him when I was working at CBS. I was a tour guide and usher on the Young and the Restless.
Oh,
and
yeah. Some of you remember.
I had lunch with one of the stars in the show who was talking about how nasty he kissed during their love scenes.
You heard it here first, folks.
I love the secret history of science fiction writers. So Tananarive, your Black horror class at UCLA has become legendary. It's had celebrity guests like Jordan Peele, which is so amazing. And your research for that class basically turned into a documentary TV series. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about what that's been like to turn a class into a TV series.
That is so funny that you asked that, and thank you for asking that. I want to shout out Dr. Robin Armeens Coleman, who actually wrote a book called Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror, that they adapted, and I was lucky enough to just be tapped because they had heard about the Jordan Peele visit to my class, which went mildly viral in the sense that a student taped 10 seconds when he was walking up to the front of the classroom, and the class was going nuts, and that's all he posted. And that went viral, like 10 seconds. He talked about it on Colbert. So they did all the work. The Horror Noir team did all the work. They brought me in as an executive producer. And I say it's so funny, I've been publishing Black horror since 1995, but I finally got famous as a teacher, right? That's kind of what happened.
Well, they say those who can't do.
They also say that fiction is a form of pedagogy.
There you go.
There you go. Stephen, we understand that there was someone in the science fiction writing world who really kickstarted your desire to be a science fiction writer, and can you tell us about that?
No, somebody in the science fiction writing world who really kickstarted my...
Like Ray Bradbury?
Oh my God.
Ray Bradbury.
Ray Bradbury.
Yeah, we heard a little story about that.
Well, I guess I can start at the very beginning. You can tell me if you want to push it a little bit further than that. But
he was born.
I was born a small black child. No, when I was about 25, I guess, I wrote a short story called Trick or Treat, which was about a kid who grows up in a neighborhood in an escalating war of nerves, playing Halloween pranks with the other kids, right? and how he gets to be a man, and these tricks get worse and worse, and then finally one year, one of the kids dies, and he knows that the next year they're going to kill him. So I wrote this story, and my girlfriend at the time illustrated it, and we gave a copy of it to Ray Bradbury, who was doing a signing, right? Maybe I was 24, but it was like my first contact with a real writer person. And he wrote me a letter back some weeks later saying, what a scary story. It was really, really nice of him. Years later, I was maybe 4 years later, I was taking a class at UCLA from Robert Kirsch, who was the literary editor for the LA Times, and I wrote a story called Is Your Glass Half Empty? About a compulsive gambler who hawks his pacemaker. And I was in a class with a lot of strange people, but even in that category, in that grouping, Dr. Kirsch knew that he was dealing with somebody a little outside his ordinary range of expertise. And he asked me, would I mind if he passed my story to a friend of his? I said, sure. And about 6 weeks later, I got a letter from Ray Bradbury, saying that I really had something. So what basically happened there was that Ray had then twice given me reason to believe that maybe I had something of value. So there's more to this story, but I want to move things, let things move along. But that was just incredibly important to me. What an incredibly gracious sweetheart of a brilliant human being, so in touch with his child that he could make the contact with the child part of others and understand how desperately someone like me might have been. I've heard similar stories from so many people. Just the epitome of human kindness.
Yeah. Mentorship is so important in this community, and that's just such a great story of someone reaching out and doing that. I wonder if you guys could talk about what you've learned from doing your podcast together and working together on that.
Well, first of all, anyone can do a podcast. I mean, you knew that. You knew that already.
We know that.
But,
we know that for sure.
But no, I'm late to learning that, and I mean that in really all the best ways. It just feels like we said, hey, let's do a podcast, sort of an idea. We hired a consultant, best $200 we ever spent, Blurred Girl, you might follow her. Karima Horn was our consultant. And she told me about a program called Descript that everybody should use. It's
Descript.
Descript, D-E-S-C-R-I-P-T. It is audio and video editing that is text-based. So if you erase the words, it erases on the tape. And it has changed everything, because I hate audio editing. And aside from the technical aspects, I've learned that I'm a real podcast producer nerd, and I get way too into it. But I love being a producer, and I love the way talking about craft and the life-work balance with this man every week actually strengthens our relationship. Like, there are things we talk out on the podcast that we haven't talked out in real life sometimes. And it's interesting how it's easier sometimes to do it that way.
Let me back up one. No, this is not going where you think. Get your mind out of there. Back up a conceptual level to another question, which is, what is it like to collaborate with someone that you're married to? And because what I wanted to say is that what it requires is clarity of values. That when we first met each other, we understood the potential of our relationship. And we had to come up with some rules. And one of the rules about collaborating together, because we knew that was going to happen, was that the marriage always comes first. That there is no circumstance under which, because you have to feel free to fight fairly. I mean, if you can argue with yourself when you're trying to create something, imagine arguments between partners. If you're going to be honest, there are going to be times you're going to be going at it hammer and tongue, bang, 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 and you can't be afraid to fight. You can't be afraid that your abandonment issues cannot kick in. It's like it's an idea that's being tested. It's not about your worth.
It's hard, people. It's very hard.
It's very hard. And there has to be an agreement that we don't take it to sleep. We don't take it into dreamland. That we deal with it before we go to bed. We kiss goodnight every night. We hug and cuddle each other every day. that without that feeling, then the child part of you who creates is going to be afraid of being abandoned, because we've all been abandoned and had that fear. You have to put that aside. And it can be extremely difficult, but it is so incredibly rewarding. I mean, I have this amazing collaborative partner here. Tananarive is a force. She just is. And if I can't come correct and keep myself balanced as a human being to deal with a woman with this much power, I will miss out on the potential of having a partnership that is generative and nurturing and just amazing in so many different ways. So it behooves me to keep my ego out of it and to just say, what can we do together? So the same thing comes into the podcast, where we're having conversations with people or with each other about the work-life balance, lifewritingpodcast.com for anybody who's
Don't
wondering.
ask podcasters about their podcast. what are you even thinking about? But no, we were so lucky just from the time we just said, hey, let's do this. Our first guest was Roy Wood Jr. from The Daily Show. Our second guest was Patton Oswalt. These were people, Patton Oswalt, I had never even really met him. We, messaged on Twitter, but he was like, sure. And I was pretty shocked. And N.K. Jemisin, we've had so many amazing guests. So that has been a real revelation too, that people will come on your podcast.
And that's part of the networking thing, because the people you're on podcasts with become part of your circle. And it's incredibly important to craft the circle of people that you're associating with if you want to move your life in a particular direction. It's the fastest way of making progress or of destroying your life is to associate with the wrong people. So it's a way of announcing to the universe, this is the kind of person that I want to be, and then stepping into that with power.
That's amazing. So I have one last question, which is also about collaboration. Both of you have collaborated on fiction with other authors and with each other, and how do you write fiction with another person but keep your own voice in the mix and keep your own vision in the mix? And you kind of answered that a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about that.
It's a very difficult balance. I still love the feeling of writing a short story that's just sort of whatever crosses my mind, what I want to do, that part of me. And I still write, I have a solo novel coming out next year, The Reformatory, but the majority of my writing right now is collaborative, I would say, with Steve. We're working on a lot of scripts, most of them you don't see, but we're working on them, whether you see them or not. And the art of the fight is so important, because if I don't speak up because I don't have a confrontational nature, or I don't have confidence in my idea, and I just say, oh, okay, that might mean it's not as good a story. It doesn't go down into the heart of where it's supposed to be going. So there are times that we do have to really dig in. So having those rules about keeping that separate, and it's easier said than done. But that's been very important.
I was incredibly blessed to serve an apprenticeship with someone like Larry Niven, to work with him. And he taught me some rules of collaboration. Somebody has to be in charge. One of the other partners has to have the kill switch. Now, with me and Larry, I've always let it be him. With me and Tananarive, it differs depending on what the project is. And you always know which one of us had lead by whose name comes first on the title. I mean, seriously, you can just look at it and see, okay, Tananarive was taking the lead writing this. Steve was taking the lead writing this. That thing about the collaboration, it hit its peak when I was working with Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, because they were already a writing partner. I came in because they came in with an idea for what might have been a short story, a novella. It was almost like an EC Comics horror story. These guys had just come off the New York Times bestseller list, and I said to myself, if you let them get away with a short story, you're crazy, Steve. So I talked them into thinking, oh no, this could be a book. Can't you see? No, honest, look, this is a whole novel you've got here. And I was so convincing that Jerry, to his dying day, thought it had been his idea. But what was amazing is I'm not sure how many people in the history of the world have ever had two world-class writers sitting on opposite sides of the room tearing apart their prose. Because I would write rough draft, I'd give it to them, and Larry would be reading. He's so polite, such a nice guy. Jerry just took joy. We're eviscerating Barnes's precious prose. Barnes, was your mother scared by a gerund? I mean, I would drive home at night crying because it hurt so much. But I knew something. I knew that if I could handle it, I would learn skills it was impossible to learn in any school in the world. That I had to keep my ego out of it again. That theme comes back around. That I was being taught with love. That the fact that he thought I was worth going through that kind of grueling test was like being thrown into the black belt class. Yes, you are going to be bruised when you crawl off the mat, but if you've got the heart for it, you're going to learn, and you're going to learn fast. I was blessed to be brutalized in that particular sense.
Thank you so much, Stephen Barnes and Tananarive Dew, everybody. Guest of honor. So wow, I guess the con's already over. It seems like it just started. I can't believe it.
I know, we're already at the closing ceremony, so guess I'm gonna head out to the airport, yeah.
That was a great con, though. I mean, you know, there was that 5-person emu costume. There was the snow cone, the fuzzy grasshopper. I don't know. What do you remember?
I mean, mostly I just remember Godzilla and Ghidorah. I mean, that's kind of what I'm focused on right now. But good night, everybody.
Safe travels home.
Give it up for all of our guests of honor and special guests.